Today we're going to do something that's freaking awesome. Okay, I am here with an author, Dr. Jason Williams. He wrote a book on George Washington's cave, Masonic cave. It's a Masonic cave, and we are in the Shenandoah Valley of what is now West Virginia, but it was Virginia back in the day. And this cave, now I've actually been here like a long time ago because we're really close to where I grew up, but you know a lot about the history of this cave, and there's something I never knew about. In fact, you wrote a book, I'll show it to you, huge book that talks all about the Masonic part of the cave, which is really interesting. Of course, George Washington and all those people back then were pretty much all Masons. Illuminati. Can I say that? I'm not even sure what that is.
Well, George Washington said the Illuminati never really made it into America. So at that point...
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, he wrote about the Illuminati, but he said, as far as he knew, they never infiltrated the lodges in America.
Okay, yeah, because you know, it's funny because I did read your book, but it's been like a year ago. And I was just thinking, because I'm old, that Illuminati was like a new thing, but it isn't. It was back in the 1700s, or that was in Europe or something, wasn't it?
Bavaria. It was started in Bavaria.
Yeah, so probably what we consider now to be the Illuminati and what is really the Illuminati, two different things.
Probably so.
Yeah, probably so. But I get ahead of myself.
But you never know, right?
You never know. Exactly. Be aware that this is private property. It's gated. There are houses here. We just talked to the landowner, so we have permission to be here. But you can't just come here on your own because the landowner will not like that. All right?
That is correct.
All right, so we're at the cave entrance now. You can see there's a big limestone wall here. That's the actual cave entrance right there. You can see there's a stone wall built up. It was actually tours in here, I think back in like the 1920s?
1920s.
1920s, and we'll see some concrete and stuff, but I believe that's probably what that's from.
Do you remember what the cost was to get into the cave?
No, how much?
You had to buy a hot dog.
Really?
1748 is the date on the carving inside. It was the same year Washington, as a 16-year-old, was doing surveying work right in this neighborhood for the Fairfax family. It was called the Cave Farm, which is right next to the cave, and it was the property of George William Fairfax, who was George Washington's best buddy during his teenage years. And so it makes sense that they came out here to take a look at the cave that was attached to Fairfax's property. Kind of like how Mount Vernon, further east in Virginia, the soil was getting devitalized, and so they were looking for fresh soil over here to plant their tobacco and other crops. And Washington built his own plantation out here starting in about 1750. He started purchasing land about 2 miles from here and built his first home and his first plantation before he even had Mount Vernon. It was still in his older half-brother's hands. So his first property was out here near Charlestown. You
know, that's something I don't think many people know. I mean, I can honestly say I didn't know that until I read your book. That I know a lot of his family was out here, lots of Washington homes in this area, but I never knew that he actually had a plantation right a couple miles from here.
Yep, and he mentions in the letter that this, specifically where this cave is in relation to his farm out here. So we know that this is indeed the cave. He wrote a letter in, I believe, the early 1760s to a friend overseas. This friend had come to Virginia and had toured the whole eastern seaboard of America, stopped over and spent a couple nights with Washington at Mount Vernon, then went back to England. And then this guy wrote a letter to Washington saying, hey, remember about that cave you were telling me about? How it fills, well, he didn't use the word cave, he said well. He said, what about that well you were telling me about? Tell me more. It's very odd that it fills up with water. So Washington replied in a letter of his own, saying, no, it's not a well, it's a cave. And yes, from my experience, the water rises and then goes down based off of just the rainfall, the storms passing through. Local legend is that this cave was used by the Freemasons starting in 1754 for the French and Indian War. So it's possible maybe somebody then sort of memorialized Washington's earlier visit as a teenager and carved it. We don't know for sure. But whoever carved it somehow knew that Washington was here as a teenager in 1748, which is unusual because Washington's diary that talks about his visit here really wasn't published until like the late 1800s, early 1900s. But The first historical mention of the signature in this cave is from the 1830s and early 1830s. Even then, it says it's a long-standing tradition about this signature in Washington visiting here. So whoever had put this here before the 1830s knew about Washington's movements as a teenager. It was either Washington or somebody that knew him very closely, a brother. Charles Washington founded Charlestown, which is right outside of where we are.
Why pick that date, you know? I mean, we know he was here then, but why would someone years later pick that date?
Right.
It's just strange.
Yes. The year before, 1747, George Fairfax was given a piece of property right across the street, 100 feet from here, and it's called the Cave Farm, or the property that became the Cave Farm. He was given the survey for it the year before. And so it makes sense that in 1748, the young George Washington and his best friend at the time, George Fairfax, came out here. We know this because it's in Washington's journal, that he came out here to probably see his best buddy's new farm that he had just gotten title to. And they probably were like, hey, let's go in the cave, 1748.
That's what we're getting ready to do. We're going to follow in George Washington's footsteps into this cave, and we're going to try to find that carving in the wall. And hopefully the water's not up to our chest, because you said you were here one time and it was pretty deep.
I've been here several times. It's been bone dry one time, and it's been about neck high one time. The time that I did get back there was about hip high, and it's chilly water. But yes, the water rises and falls just like Washington told us it does.
Isn't that cool?
Yep.
So, I mean, that pretty much, in my experience, having grown up here and being a local caver, you know, spelunker, somebody goes in these caves all the time, I mean, you don't see a lot of that. I mean, I don't know of any cave anywhere around here that has that phenomena where you can walk down in it one day and it'll be dry, and the next day, you know, after heavy rain, there's a bunch of water in it. You just don't see that.
And it fascinated Washington back then as a young man, and enough so that he corresponded about it to somebody back in England. That's what, and now here it sits with a sofa bed lying here, garbage. It's sad. A place that was really important to Washington is completely not even known historically. I've had historians tell me there's no proof that Washington went inside that cave. Well, they clearly haven't read my book, because I found a letter from George Washington that says he did.
And it's stronger proof as you're really ever going to find.
Unless you get CCTV footage, which I don't think we ever will, Jim.
Part of the old stone wall I was telling you about, this was here during the American Civil War, because there's a sketch of it, and it shows a guy standing right there in the entrance. So let's go ahead and get suited up. What do you say? Bring your scuba gear just in case?
I'm ready.
Go down in here. You can see that lots of, people come down in here. Like I said, we're not too far off the road. Old table. That looks like a water line over there.
Yep, that's where they pump water out.
Okay, back in the day, you can see the stone wall.
This would have probably been the main lodge, and you'll notice that there are even like natural ledges where Masons could sit and hold their meetings.
Yeah, there's absolutely plenty of room in here for that. And you can stand right up. Even old George could stand up in here. He was pretty tall, wasn't he?
6'3".
6'3", yeah.
He was about 5 feet tall, so maybe made quite a couple.
Yeah. So I can imagine them being in here by candlelight and torchlight, having their secret meetings, and probably during the French and Indian War, the military coming through here. This would be a nice place to hide out and have your meetings too. Wow, this is really cool, man. Such a shame that there's like a trash like this in here. Now the owner is actually in the process of getting this all cleaned up, and we look at that. People just writing stuff everywhere. You say that? Okay, you say this Masonic stuff in here?
Yeah, I've seen some Masonic emblems, and Masons come by and write their lodge number and their initials and the year. A lot of time it's modern stuff like that. 2014. You'll see some from the 1800s. Other than the Washington signature, the earliest one I found in here is 1801. So people were at least carving their names in 1801, right next to Washington's signature. But with limestone caves, it erodes. So it's hard to really interpret a lot of them too. A lot of times they don't leave the full year, they just put the 2 digits. It's a little hard to know, is it 1968 or 1868 or 1768?
That's 18, looks like 1860 and maybe one. And if that's the case, that's a Civil War era. Can't really read if there's a regiment or anything in there. Although there are caves in the area that do have soldiers that sign their regiments.
This is an 1840 or maybe 1870.
That's an old one. We'll look at that in a minute. Where at? 18.
Is that 1870 or 1840? A little hard to tell.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, it almost could be a 18.
How about this one
16?
right here? 18. Is that a 0? 1805 maybe?
I can't see it. Actually. 8, yeah. That one's hard to see too, isn't it? The writing on this one over here looks like it was very old. Boy, 10, no, 18 or 18 something. Looks like 1800 something.
1801 is, I found one, it was a clear 1801.
Yeah.
It's a diary that was kept by a woman during the Revolutionary War. And she and her husband would come here to the cave during the summertime, and she describes tourists coming into the cave and admiring things inside the cave. The man who rented the cave to her during the Revolutionary War was one General John Bull, who was from Pennsylvania. And he was a logistical general, not on the battlefield. He was involved with raising finances, and he was going back and forth between Pennsylvania and here in Charlestown. He bought property here, and he was renting out the cave. What's interesting is John Bull was one of the leading Freemasons back in Philadelphia, and also was the Grand Master of the Lodge at Valley Forge. And that's where it was proposed that George Washington be made the highest Mason in all of America and oversee all the lodges. That never came to pass. Each lodge is run at the state level. But it was John Bull who was the lead Freemason who proposed that idea. It's interesting that during the Revolutionary War, he came to live right down the road from the cave here. And a lot of George Washington's closest confidants and generals all lived and visited this area. And even in this journal, she records about French soldiers coming out here and meeting with the generals right here at the cave. So, which is very odd. It's very peculiar that this cave was even, and they were allowing tourists in even back in the early 1780s during the war, perhaps admiring the George Washington signature. We don't know what. There's a lot of interesting history tied to this cave. I've documented everything that I could find in my book, Jake. So if anyone has an interest in this, that's where they can find more.
Well, let's take a quick peek at your book, when we get back out to the vehicle, so people can see what it's all about. 'Cause noticing this is a Masonic symbol of some sort right there, for sure. And that looks like a really old carving, doesn't it?
Yep.
I'm not sure if there's a date there or not. I'll get a picture of that for you guys so you can, maybe we can read that name. Looking at the name Willette here, that's actually a derivation of my name. We met, but I didn't do that. Are we just looking at this? Was that the one we were just looking at?
Yeah, and there's another one.
And then there's another one, very similar, a different thing in the center.
Look at this one. That's the clearest one.
Oh,
right
yeah,
there.
there's another
G.
one.
So it's the square and compasses, which is the primary symbol of Freemasonry.
Yeah, and those are definitely old.
Yeah, those were not
Okay,
carved yesterday.
I bet you if we look for the places that have been rubbed, we'll probably find all the older ones. I'm just kind of looking at this area right here. There's a skull and crossbones, and people scratch their names, and I think the date is 1968. And you were saying that the skull and crossbones
symbol that means eternal life, and it's featured on George Washington's Masonic apron, the one that was gifted to him by Lafayette. And that apron is very much tied to this cave and the history of this cave. You can read about it in the book, of course, but it's that apron is in the Masonic Lodge about 10 miles from here, the Mount Nebo Masonic Lodge. They hold the apron that was given to Washington by the Marquis de Lafayette.
Lafayette, if you don't know, he's really famous. If you're into history and especially the Revolutionary War, that's somebody that's worth reading about. And he's all through the records of the Revolutionary War. He did a lot of good stuff, and he was like George Washington's kind of adopted son almost.
Yeah, not almost. He was. George Washington referred to him as my son, like my son. He heard about Washington as a teenager back in England, and he actually heard about it from the King of England's brother, who had been outcast by the family. When he heard about George Washington forming an army of farmers and blacksmiths and shop owners, he was intrigued by this idea of freedom. And he came over here, volunteered. George Washington had sort of given up on a lot of the French volunteers who were only looking for fame or money, but Lafayette came over here and at his own expense joined George Washington, was, you know, through the darkest, bleakest days of Valley Forge, was with Washington. And along with Ben Franklin, was instrumental in getting the King of France to agree to help the Americans win the war. Without Lafayette, we would not have won. What's ironic is shortly after America gained its freedom, the French started having their own revolution, and Lafayette kind of got caught up in that, was even imprisoned. And America, you know, against many people's, you know, ideas, did not come to the aid of the French and supported the British more. And so there was a lot of debate about that during Washington's time, about should we back the French in their attempts of a revolution, and we didn't really.
The French helped us form our country, and we abandoned them 10, 20 years later completely. I just made friends with the British again, I guess,
and
more or less. All right, so what we're going to do now is head back to where the signature should be. That's that drain pipe where they pump the water out of it. You want to go first? Want me to go first?
You go first.
All right.
Yeah, keep on heading back.
Wow, that's a nice big room here.
All right.
There's water down there. You can see there's water.
Yeah.
Most awesome.
Yep, we were up to our hip in water before, but it's bone dry today. Head on back here. Can you see George Washington's signature?
No, but I see a lot of other things in here. Wow, look at that mess. Can you see it?
Well, look at this big, is that a square nail?
Oh, no, that's a round nail.
Is it a round nail?
Yeah, there's a couple round nails
I'm
there.
pretty sure that this was installed here so you could hang your light there, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to look over here, and you see anything that looks like it might say Washington?
Not yet. That's it up there?
Yeah. Can you spot it? Can your viewer see it? SG, and then you can see W. Both of them are in a different font than the rest of the Washington that comes over here. And then at the very tail end, you can see the 1748. Looks like it's been really smoothed down. The first photograph of it was from the 50s, 1950s, and it's more eroded. I took the second picture of it, and it's more eroded than it was back in the 1950s.
Yeah, well, it looks like people have been like rubbing it and stuff. You know, you can see that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of grime, and people may want to do like tracings, like take paper and do lead tracings over it, and that just sort of damages it. And eventually it'll be gone if it's not cared for.
Yeah, I mean, look at this mess. Why do people do this? I mean, it's not like these are even old, you know.
Yeah, well,
You know, 2014. And,
George Washington may be to blame. He's the first one.
well, I have to admit, I'm a little bit, I'm not going to say disappointed, but a little disturbed because, you got George Washington's signature there, and look at this mess. I mean, these are like fairly new. Such a shame that people are just defacing it like that. Heck, there's even looks like an SS there, you know. This is horrible, man. I feel so bad about this. But yeah, there it is. Hopefully, the new owner, I hate to say it, but can get a gate on this thing, so they can get this preserved, keep it, you know, preserved as much as we can, and you know, maybe get it back to. Get this into our history.
Since kept coming here until about 1844, a couple decades before the Civil War. still honoring George Washington's involvement in their fraternity. And then they stopped coming here, and then the Civil War happened, and the history of this part of the Shenandoah Valley just tore everything up, and no one even kind of remembered the colonial history that took place here before the Civil War.
I never really thought about that, but that's very true, because there is a lot of Revolutionary War history here, War of 18, or French and Indian War history here.
Right.
But you don't ever read about that, and that is because of Civil War.
Right.
Came right up through here, Shenandoah Valley.
Yeah.
And it's a shame, and it's a shame that
Most people don't even know the Washingtons. This is where this is where George Washington, established his first plantation. Almost no one's even heard of it before. He called it the Bullskin. No one's heard of the Bullskin. You've heard of Mount Vernon. Try to Google Bullskin and you'll probably get my webpage. Well, no one's ever done any sort of archaeological dig, or no one's ever done any history about this, and so that's what got me interested. I'm a big George Washington buff, and this was a chapter of his life that really has gone unrecognized. His time in the Freemasons, but his time out here on the frontier as well, even before the French and Indian War. Truth be told, this cave needs to be protected, and probably somebody needs to come in and do a little bit more of a formal investigation than I did, because I'm just an amateur. Up there, we climbed up there and found some fragments of chinaware that looked like from the 1700s, the style and age from around that time. So that was just a casual inspection. Clearly no one's come in to really do much of a true dig here. Down here, I think that may have been one of the bones we saw up on this ledge. It looks like it's fallen over. I think it was.
Is it human?
It's a vertebral body.
Yeah, it's pretty big. Yeah,
it's pretty big. So,
it's bigger than human, I think, right?
A big person, maybe a bear. I don't know. Last time we were in here, it was setting up right here. It must have fallen down.
They brought in gravel.
Right.
To build this up to make a nice little place to stand, I guess. Yeah. And you're saying that you think, as a Mason.
Well, I'm not a Mason, but I've done a lot of research on Freemasonry and how lodges work, and this could have been the side chamber where an initiate knew a man about to be initiated into their fraternity may have been brought back into this room based off of the whole allegory and tradition of caves and Freemasons. There's a lot of symbolism, and so it's actually the reasons why Freemasons have used caves all over the world, and some people say the Knight Templars have too. This room, based off of its direction and orientation, would have been the room where a new member would have been blindfolded, shown certain things, and then led off into the main lodge room in order to be initiated, to finish the initiation and just become a full Mason. So I suspect that's what this little chamber would have been used for.
All right, so this is the book you wrote, and like I said, it's huge, full of information. This is the fancy color edition, right?
Yes, there's also a black and white version. Try to present it in a way that's both interesting, but also balanced as far as, is this historical fact or is this all fiction? Try to sort it out a little bit. Yeah, the publisher has it for sale on Amazon. I didn't publish it. They do all that, but yeah, it is sold on Amazon.
Okay, cool. I really appreciate you getting me involved in this and bringing me out here. And
you're welcome.
That's awesome,
Chig.
man.
Been great.
Yeah,
Okay.
It has. Let's get back out there again.
Yep.
Maybe some other place.
We'll do that.
Scotland, right? You said something going on in Scotland.
I've got an idea. It's a big one. It's another cave.
Maybe you'll see us there next. Cave in Scotland. Thanks for watching.
She'll shake the coins from your pocket, take your gold chain and your locket. Mother Earth has no sympathy. She'll take the ring from your hand and bury it in the sand and keep it for eternity. Mother Earth, she's got her secrets she's promised to keep, hidden in her dirt or deep in her creek. Mother Earth, she ain't saying exactly what she's saving, where it is or what it might be. Mother Earth, you are my lady, my big round baby. I'll rock you until I go to sleep. She don't care if you're dying, or if you're living, or somewhere in between. Mother Earth, you are my lady, my big round baby, and I'll rock you until I go to sleep. She'll shake the coins from your pocket, take your gold chain and your locket. Mother Earth has no sympathy. She'll take the ring from your hand and bury it in the sand and keep it for eternity. Mother Earth, she's got her secrets she's promised to keep, hidden in her dirt or deep in her creek. Mother Earth, she ain't saying exactly what she's saving, where it is or what it might be. Mother Earth, you are my lady, my big round baby. I'll rock you until I go to sleep. She don't care if you're dying, or if you're living, or somewhere in between.
Alright, let's go see what it is.